Hello, everybody. It's me, Lovey, again. Welcome in. I guess you clicked on here to think of what is she on about now again, eh? Well, what is my title? The title, in brackets, The Hats I Wore. In my adult life, of course, not in my childhood. Uncloaked. Me analyzing the person that I was under those titles. What are these titles? Your parents, mother, father, friends, husband, wife, boss, employee, everybody that you were something to, whether it's in business, whether it's personal. It had a title. It has a title in this world. So, so the titles that I was born into, and there are some titles that I chose because of marriage, because of um, purchasing, and things like that. These titles attached to that as well. So I can be a buyer or I can sell something. So in the business world, there's a title, boss and employee. So some titles were chosen, some titles we are born into. And what did I do under the title as an obligation? You know, I'm not thinking of mother and father because there's an obligation, because children are vulnerable. They are born into a world they cannot do things for themselves. I'm talking about the titles that we carry through and hold on to and pull upon ourselves in our adult life. And I basically did an analysis of myself. Everything I do is not about anybody else, it's just about me. And I always have to have a reference. After I do these things, I have to have a reference. So pen and paper is my friend. And I made columns and I put all the type, I put it down as headings was, you know, what were the titles in all my relationships. And the title, and there was column forgive and receive, and the outcome of that situation. Now remember, my foundation is in religion. My introduction to God is in religion, which in the Christian religion, so I embodied the virtues of Christ because I wanted to find favor with God. And what are these virtues that governed my life? It was humility, serving serving others in humility, um, kindness was the action for compassion. Um, Grace was the action for forgiveness. Living in the moral principle of integrity was your truth. Living faithfully in accordance with the will of God according to the religion was obedience. And to keep the faith in trials and tribulations was courage. And to give unto others charitably was unconditional love. And to not come in as a raging bull when somebody does something to you is to be gentle regardless of your status. So after doing all this analysis, and according to the pattern that I chose to do the analysis, the outcome was basically used, abused, gave. And on the as a recipient, me as the recipient in the column, next to none. It was very minimal, very, very minimal, up to a point of basically almost nothing. So all the giving, I never got back, whether it was Not that we give because we want back, but we give and we give to a point of exhaustion where we don't have any more. Our funds can be depleted, our energy is depleted, like I said, our funds are financed, our emotions are depleted because we give, because of our title. And the virtues I practiced had an outcome of mental exhaustion, and my physical health was in jeopardy. So I went to the Bible, and this going to the Bible was a discussion that I had with my daughter yesterday with regards to a series, I think it's called The Chosen. And we were speaking about the last um, actions and activities of Christ before he was crucified. And she told me what hit her about the movie was Christ was healing people in a tent. He was feeding a multitude of people. He was holding the Sermon on the Mountain. And then he was so exhausted. And I thought to myself, if we compare it in our lives today, we might not be doing in comparison with Christ, but our titles, uh, our obligation to our titles allow us, not allow us, but sort of gives us an avenue to do things because of the virtues that we live by. Basically, the virtues that I live by. So when Christ was doing all these things, healing and giving and being kind and compassionate and all that, I'm so sorry, it's hot flushes. I don't know how many times I had to redo this video. And I'm not going to redo it again now, I'm sorry. In any case, with all that he did, he had so many followers. So many people walked after him. So many people wanted to be there by him. But was it for him? Or was it just all about themselves? That's the Christ part in the Bible. However, with all this missionary work that he was doing and all this preaching and guiding of people and healing people, his body could only take so much. And I would say his emotional and mental state would have also been literally depleted. And when the apostles came back from the mission, they were exhausted. And they reported how exhausted they were. And then Christ said to them, they must go and rest. They must get away and go and rest. And the people were still chasing after them, even in the fact that they were on their way to go and rest. And I came to a point where I now, because of the analysis that I did on this piece of paper, now compared my practicing the virtues of Christ, the way Christ was practicing the virtues, and the outcome was basically the same. Because it all came down to giving, 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 and over giving, because we I think I perceived it was the obligation of practicing the virtues of Christ in the title as a child of God, according to my religion. And then, when it came to the before Christ was crucified, something struck me, and I understood my darkness when I started analyzing what am I supposed to do to hold on to the virtues, but yet do it differently with discernment, and for those who are worthy, which means it's a form of judgment that I'm doing, which is things that I didn't like to do. It would put me in a state of despair because now I'm fighting, because I'm sinning. And the thought of that moment, if I was Christ, I would have probably said, Father, I can't anymore. I am so, so tired. I am so, so exhausted. I had nothing to eat. I have never had a moment of rest. I've been busy, busy, busy. So remember, it is my human mind and perception of the word that I received in the sermons, in the religion I was, that I have to do it a certain way. So that was my perception. Was Christ any different? Because being is not exhausting. That I've been practicing now for the past 3 years. Just being is not exhausting. So Christ wasn't just being, but he said, I am. So when he couldn't anymore, and he laid down the need of the obligation to prove probably that he was the Messiah and having to do the work of the Messiah, it must have been traumatizing. Another trauma on top of the trauma of having to do all these things. And in all of that, I kind of understood where he was, because he had to walk away from everything and everybody. That cross was the way that he was practicing his virtues in his daily life. That was the burden that caused his exhaustion. Now I asked myself, was it a physical wooden cross? Because we tend to interpret the Bible in everything in a physical manner because it suits our understanding, I think. But now in the space that I am now, and what my daughter and I discussed yesterday, I am now asking the questions. The way the burden, the way the virtues were put in practice, was that the cross that Christ bore? Because that was my cross. I laid down my cross. I didn't lay down the virtues. I laid down the way that I practiced the virtues that I embody. Did Christ do the same? Because remember, he gave up everything. He crucified the old way of thinking that he had to. And the death, because the Bible depicted as a stone was he was buried and all that because of the time it happened. But if I look at it in a spiritual sense and compare it to my death of that kind of way of doing things, have to and need to, because I want to find favor before God, which became an obligation, and a need to fulfill that obligation was the way that I did it. And compared to Christ, that's the way he did it too, and his outcome was the same as my outcome. And it didn't have anything to do with the physical death, because I died many deaths in that 3 days, many deaths in that 3 days. Of everything I believed and the way I operated in this world, I had to die off. I had to die off from that. I had to remove myself from everybody to get clarity about my feelings. And the only feeling that I wanted to feel was, I wanted to feel good. I wanted to be joyful. Yes, I can be joyful in my circumstances, but that's faith. That's trusting. That's having faith and trusting. But do I have to stay in the circumstances? Do I have to make the same choice to stay in those circumstances? Or can I choose differently? And then I chose differently. And now I'm lighter. And I'm in a different place than what I was 3 years ago and even yesterday. So when Christ reintroduced himself to his apostles, we think about it, they were the only ones that knew what he went through, because they suffered the exhaustion as well, because they followed his example. And whatever he said to them, because he now had a new way of teaching them. He was now in an elevated state. He was in a totally different perspective now. And those that never saw and did what he did, like the apostles did, they weren't there when he elevated. Only the people that knew what he went through was there. So, the aftermath back to me. I release the bondage of the virtues, but yet I'm still holding on to the virtues. The bondage of I have to, the bondage I must, the bondage of if I don't, I will be punished. When Christ walked away and he crucified the way he did the virtues, he was now taking care of himself. He now had self-love, self-respect. He wasn't giving it away willy-nilly anymore. He was now just being. And I can resonate with that because I am just being. In whatever my day holds, I'm just being. Is it a matter of the seen versus the unseen? Is this what spiritual balance means? To become one, the human and the being. The being, spirit, and it becomes one, but it is just now presented and projected differently than the need and the obligation. So the need and the obligation is not there anymore. Everything that is done is because I want to. Everything I am is because I choose to. Just be. Is that what love is? Trusting in peace and patience. Ever trusting, having the faith, trusting in peace and patience. Well, that was my rabbit hole that I went into. And I trust nobody's going to crucify me for my interpretation of being as I am now. And using the comparison with Christ, and probably people will think I'm shading the story of what the Bible says. I just saw another side of it. I'm not shading the story at all. I'm just seeing the other side of the story. So, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if nobody else is okay with that. And as long as I'm still feeling good, I am okay with that too. I thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your energy with me. I hope I didn't confuse anybody, but in any case. But that's where I got to. But I wish you peace, joy, patience, and love for yourself on this journey, because the valley is real, but coming out of this valley is bliss, absolute bliss. Take care of yourselves. Until next time, bye bye.